It's just heartbreaking to see the violence that people have had to endure.
Scenes of their screeching play out on social media for all to see.
An up-close look at a problem plaguing Minnesota's fourth largest city.
He abandoned us. I mean, what the hell kind of leader does that?
Oh my God!
If this is allowed to continue, what happens?
Teachers will leave.
Clearly, the system is flawed.
There's not one bit of evidence which suggests that this naturally emerged.
If something doesn't change, I think eventually this country could collapse.
We need to talk.
We need to talk.
We need to talk
about race, identity, and privilege.
To have a real conversation about Black lives in America.
And be honest about who is taking advantage of us and keeping us divided.
To be Black in America today is to be labeled and used.
But it's not because America is a systemically racist country.
It is not.
It is not.
It's not.
It's because the loudest voices who say they have all the answers are actually the problem.
There are progressive forces and organizations dividing us as a people and as a country.
They stoke hatred and division
to hide the real problems
and keep us angry.
We've seen this pattern repeat itself over and over again.
We have to take a new course.
And now's the time to return to our cultural roots of faith, family, and education.
Over half of Black students in Minneapolis public schools are failing.
But Black students in the same neighborhoods who attend private faith-based schools perform above national averages.
Every parent should have the choice and the right to send their child to a safe and excellent school.
And today, nearly 80% of Black children in the Twin Cities live day to day without their father.
That's 4 out of every 5. But it didn't used to be this way.
As recently as the 1970s, 75% of Black children lived in 2-parent families.
Having a mom
and a dad
in the home is the quickest way to reduce poverty and gain equality.
Finally,
Every American is endowed with God-given rights, and those rights create opportunities.
We will succeed when we return to our faith in God
and the core principles of our nation.
You see, there is a difference between being woke and being awakened.
There's a new movement growing in America
to restore the institution of the Black family
and secure our full rights and privileges as Americans.
We invite you to join us.
We invite you to join us.
We invite you to join us
and take charge of our culture
and our future.
Hello, I'm Kendall Qualls, President and founder of Take Charge, and one of your moderators tonight.
Hello, I'm Sheila Qualls, Executive Director of Take Charge. Thank you for joining us.
You know, probably about 2 weeks ago, I wrote an article about Daniel Patrick Moynihan and his Moynihan report. And we have a panel of guests here to join us to talk about what's happened since he wrote that article, or actually wrote that report 60 years ago. And so we have an eclectic group of professionals, people dedicated to seeing a return to the family. And I want, for audience purposes, I want to kind of give you an idea of the background of this group. So raise your hand if you're not from the state of Minnesota. Okay, good, thank you. And so we have people from outside our state, across the country, representing 5, I believe 6 different states. Raise your hand if you consider yourself, you know, you can volunteer and opt in, a baby boomer, like me, okay? Gen X, Gen Z, okay, we had one. But here's what we have here. We have an audience that's going to provide their feedback on this issue, on what's happened to the Black culture since 60 years ago of that report. Again, that article you can find on our Take Charge website at takechargeus.com. And when I wrote that article, I got a personal note from the daughter of former Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And Sheila, you wanted to share a little bit about that conversation you had with his daughter?
Yeah, actually, I do. So this month actually is the 60th anniversary of the Moynihan Report, which is what it has become known as. So who was Daniel Patrick Moynihan? He was, number one, he was a Democrat, and he worked for 4 different administrations, Republican and Democrat. And eventually he ended up being a senator from New York. When he was an appointee to the U.S. Department of Labor under the LBJ administration, he noticed this startling statistic. He noticed that 24% of Black children in inner cities and urban areas were born out of wedlock. And he himself grew up in a fatherless home, so he knew the issues that children have when they grow up when they don't have a father in the home. So he wrote a private memo to President Johnson called The Negro Family, the Case for National Attention. And he said, look, these kids are going to be cut off from society. They are not going to be able to function. They're not going to be socialized within the norms of our society, within their families. And he also said that the welfare system is destroying our families. It is destroying Black culture, the structure of the Black family. And he said that it is creating a matriarchal society, which is actually circumventing Black men and cutting them off from their families. So this private memo was leaked to the press, and it has become since known as the Moynihan Report. And now he faced intense criticism. He was called a racist, and actually critics of his said that the information that he presented was inaccurate and it was actually harmful to the culture, when in fact his findings were actually prophetic. Well, I did speak with his daughter, Maura Moynihan. She may be joining us. She may be watching the live stream tonight. But I talked with her about what was life like during that time, because he dared to criticize the state of the Black nuclear family, and he suffered for it. She talks about being spat on and being beaten up by other kids, actually the professors' kids of the university that her father taught at. And she said that her father never ever gave up on his efforts. He believed that U.S. policies should be designed to enhance and strengthen the black family, but his efforts were always defeated. Well, he died in 2003, but unfortunately, he lived to see his predictions come true. So today, that 24% of black children who were born out of wedlock, well, today that number is about how many black children are born inside marriages. Almost 80% of black children today are born outside of, into fatherless homes. And when he was asked, you know, how do you feel about this? Knowing that you were right, you've been proven right. And what he said was, it's cold comfort to be told that you're right. Since that time, millions more black children are growing up fatherless, in poverty, in crumbling schools, in crumbling homes. And he said, I think it's just going to get worse. And actually, it has.
Thank you for that, Sheila. You know, our organization, when we started 5 years ago, we did something with our mission statement. We actually started with something that was considered probably unpopular. It was in the general public. But this idea that the promise of America is available to everyone, regardless of race. We wanted to promote truth. And this narrative that we have of systemic racism, white privilege, all these different things, these false narratives. The biggest issue that we have, 90% of our problems can be addressed with this fatherless home crisis. So as we go through some of these slides, I want to kind of give you a framework for what was the black culture like before we had help from the government. So if you take a look at this, this is all U.S. Census data, and this is factual, that 80% of black families were two-parent families. Children, regardless of their financial position, these children were born and raised in a traditional nuclear family. It actually got them through some of the worst historical times in our history. The culture could be identified in three different words: faith, family, and education. Basically getting a better education for their kids. And that's what we're going to talk about. In fact, when we take a look at what happened to the culture, one pivotal thing happened. For the first time in American history, the federal government financially incentivized women to have children outside of marriage. And you go, well, what do you think? What are you talking about? How could that ever happen? Well, it happened under the Johnson administration in the 60s with aid to family with dependent children. You got financial support as long as there were no adult male living in the home. Now, on this table, you'll see between 1960 and 1970, literally significant caseload increases of people filing for and then receiving financial benefits, financial welfare programs from the federal government that didn't used to exist. And what did it do? Again, this is U.S. Census data. You can see from 1890 to 1970, black women were more likely to be married than white women in the United States. And it changed after that federal program went up. You can see the hockey stick in this graph, how significant that was. In fact, when you see marriage declining, marriage rates used to be identical regardless of ethnic background, and you see a statistically significant decrease of marriage in the black community. And the tragedy of that is that decline, we saw an increase, significant increase of out-of-wedlock births in the black community. And I can tell you, in the Twin Cities where we live, any given year, between 85 to 90% of children are born without a father in the home. Now, people will say, well, look, the father's there. They may not be married, but there is a father there. I don't buy that excuse for 1 minute. And the reason is because our ancestors didn't. Their circumstances was much more difficult than ours was today. But they stayed there. They didn't abandon their wives. They didn't abandon their children. They weren't baby daddies. So I don't call this watered down notion of a father in the home, because the statistics show that father's there only temporarily. Okay, a baby daddy is not a father. So if we take a look at this, decade after decade, and here's the tragedy of the Patrick Moynihan report. He alerted all of us, especially in the black community, but all the nation, that this was a crisis. But after 1970, 1980, 1990, and the decades followed, there's not been one red flag, not one alert that acknowledged that his report was accurate and called for a need to actually address this or to reverse the trend. Not even to this very day. So as a result, we're doing this, we're driving this in the United States today. Now, what I want to share with you that in addition to this audience that we have tonight, I invited the president of the Minneapolis NAACP, Cynthia Wilson, to attend. I invited Priscilla Stallings from the state of Minnesota, Chief Inclusion Officer, the mayor of Brooklyn Park, Hollis Winston, University of Minnesota DEI representative, Keisha Karma, she's an associate vice president there, the editorial board, one of the editorial board members from the Star Tribune, Phil Morris. Much like no action, no call of action, you won't find fatherless homes as a priority issue on the websites of the NAACP, the National Urban League, definitely not Black Lives Matter. And although we see this, this survey that we produce every year, we do a survey nationally in the Black community. These people are saying we should be incentivizing two-parent families, that having a father in a home is the best thing for children growing up. Even though that we see silence in our communities and in these national organizations, the actual people of a Black community agree with this traditional nuclear family policy, but they're not receiving it. They're not getting advocates for it. So we're going to be that advocate. So with that said, I want to go to the panel and get their feedback on this. And we'll start with Pastor Tommy Quick from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Now, Pastor Quick, you just saw the data. Tell the audience about some of the work you're doing to address some of this issue, and just your initial thoughts, and tell us about some of the things that you're doing at your church.
Well, first of all, let me say it's a tremendous pleasure to be here to be a part of this, and this issue really needs to be forefront in our communities, and every elected official and everybody that's a national leader should be addressing this. There's no doubt about it that we have suffered tremendously. I think a tremendous amount of damage has been done to us as a people that's going to require us getting really deeply involved with individual growth in order to reverse it. I think that since the Moynihan report, one of the main things that happened is that biblical roles within the family have been altered. And it makes it more difficult for men and women to live together in harmony because they have forsaken the biblical roles, the way that God designed it, and they're trying to relate in ways that may be preferred, but they don't get the result, the outcome that they want.
Why don't you share with the audience some of the things you're doing at your church, specific as it relates to people that are living together, and what options are you providing?
Well, what we do, first of all, we pursue young men and women who are in love, they feel, and they're shacking.
Yeah.
Many times they have children. And we realize that there's a certain amount of family capital that, I've written a book about that, producing family capital, that people can get once they bring their marriage under God's auspices. So we encourage them to invite Christ into their heart, make a covenant relationship with each other, and if they're willing to do it and they got financial problems, if they're willing to do it, if they go through our premarital counseling, commit to returning to us in the event that they start having challenges, then we will provide them with a free wedding at no cost to them, but we want to mentor them. We want to provide them with the comfort, the strength, the wisdom in order to be successful.
And the coaching. You said how many weddings have you had?
We've done 10 to date.
10 to date.
We've done 10 to date.
How about last year?
Last year we had 7 or 8.
Okay, so that part is growing.
It's growing. Along with that, we've established a community family center we call Family Training Center. We invite the community beyond our church to come in. We help them with financial literacy. We help them with parenting issues. We've been able to help some people that were really just in poverty to get a bed, get a job, get a car.
Yeah.
All is part of getting them under our influence of auspice so we can actually train them in how to live in a family, what their roles are. We do that. We have a personal and family institute that we do every Sunday evening where we take singles and married couples alike, and we really embed them. We actually just baptize them in this whole doctrine that family is the first institution, most important institution. It is God's manufacturing center for producing human resources that are really worthwhile. And everyone finds their purpose first there before they find their purpose in corporate world.
Okay. So Tina, I'm going to go to you next. You have a very interesting story, and it's a beautiful one. So please share with the audience how you struggled through some of this stuff we're just talking about, right?
Exactly that. I grew up single-parent family. My mom worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. She did her best, and we were welfare kids. But I did well in high school because the things that were going on around me, I didn't want to be a part of that. So I found my community in school. But the thing was, when school was ending, I didn't have a community anymore because no one told me that I could go to college. So after looking at what my friends were doing, I got pregnant. And because I felt like there was no out. This was who I was supposed to be. But then there was just something I kept trying. I wanted to work. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to make my son proud of me. But the system said, if you live with your baby's father, we will cut you off. If you get a job, we will cut you off. If you go to college, we will not help you. We won't pay for your child care. I even tried, I made it a week and then couldn't afford my own books. So I had to back out. Sad, but that was the system then.
That was the system then. You got a beautiful story. You were able to find your way out.
Yes.
And tell us what your life is like today. You've raised your children, married,
raised
obviously.
My kids. I met my husband, and to have a life partner made the difference because it wasn't me against the world. It was my family against everything else. And that gave me the courage to keep trying. Okay. And we have 4 kids, homeschooled them, and we've been married 32 years.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
That's terrific. And I'm going to do a quick lightning round with on family. 4 to 5 words. What you've heard, what does it mean? Let's start with Kevin. We have 2 Kevins, so I'm going to do Kevin Lewis. I guess let's go with Kevin Lewis in the back because you have more than a family. You're getting a sports team, but please.
Yeah. So when I think of family, I think of a place where you can find unconditional love, where you can find people that are willing to sacrifice and commit to one another, and that's been a foundation for success and growth for my family. Okay.
This is lightning round, 4 or 5 words. That's fine. I know this is the first time doing it. Okay, so we're going to go back to Sheila to pick up on education, what happened to education, and then we'll go back to the audience here again. Okay.
So every year, Take Charge does a survey. Well, actually, not every year. We've done it for 3 consecutive years that we have been in existence, and this survey. These people were Black Americans, most of them self-identified as Democrats, and the survey revealed that the majority of Black Americans do not believe that their children are being set up for success through the public school system. There was also a meta study done. It's 5 years old, and a meta study is when you take a whole bunch of studies and you put them together for one big giant study. Well, this meta study was done about 5 years ago, and it was conducted by William James from California University. And he found that when you look at Black and Hispanic kids from 2-parent families, from 2-parent religious families, that the academic disparities absolutely disappear. So that race is not the factor is family structure. Now this next clip, this is really interesting. This next clip is of university professors training public school teachers across the country. Watch this.
We need to decolonize and disrupt whiteness. It pervades everything that we do, how we start a meeting even. Agenda items. That's whiteness, right?
We're going to push these systems and we're going to use these systems for the best of our ability. And then when we can destroy them, we're going to keep destroying. So destroying capitalism is a part of our freedom dream, is a part of the long-term goal. But like we know, folks like this tell us is that we need a 40-year plan. We need a 50-year plan for freedom. And anti-capitalism is part of that 50, 60-year plan towards freedom.
Our schools are more concerned with promoting social justice than they are with academics. A nationwide study, almost 70% of low-income fourth graders cannot read at grade level. The citizenship test, this was another study that was done. So our kids aren't being taught U.S. history. They're just not being taught it in school. And this study showed that people who were 45 years and younger, only 19% of them could pass the U.S. citizenship test. Of people who were 60 years old and older, 74% of them could pass the citizenship test. Now, it's not like these 45 and younger, you know, they have a lesser IQ. They're just not being taught this stuff in school. And legacy organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, BLM, none of them advocate for two-parent families or school choice. So let's turn to our panel. Alfreda, we'll start with you. You volunteered in the public school system and you're active in the area of education. So how do schools and family impact academics?
Well, it's primarily family. If you come from a dysfunctional home and you come to school, you could have the best teacher in the world, and it's going to be a real challenge for you to do well. So I think our problem started when the family fell apart, because now you have kids coming to school from homes where mom maybe is not present or was overwhelmed. There's no discipline there. And now, thanks to progressive policies, there's no discipline at school either. So that is a real problem. And I think it's reflected in both test scores declining, but also in some of the criminality we're seeing, because these kids just aren't being educated and they're not being disciplined.
Mm. Thank you. You know, we're going to go to Vincent next. Vincent, what are your thoughts on education, on the whole education issue, and what have you done, you personally have done, to address it?
Yeah, the education issue is definitely a problem, as been stated, as you have stated. And we notice in my church that our children lack socialization skills. They also were miseducated and indoctrinated all at the same time, which are all counterproductive. And we felt that as a place of faith, we had to do something about it. We felt that we were sending our children back into the beast to be destroyed. And so we started a school, preschool. Now we're preschool through grade 9, and we've now partnered with Take Charge. And that school, many of the students came to that school with IEPs that were atrocious. Some of the IEPs, I believe, as a result of low expectations, that they could not even sit without having an aide sit with them for the entire day because they could not learn. Many of them were incorrigible based on their IEPs. They are now, I was at that school today. They are now excelling, they're learning, they're growing, they have higher expectations for themselves. As a matter of fact, a young man had a whole fundraising program to help people today and how he was going to crowdfund to raise money. So we felt that if we're more involved, getting parents as well as the community, which is our church, involved in our students, we see them excel greatly.
Yeah, you know, you talk about how you guys started the school, and you also talk about, you know, you just want people to know that you don't need a whole bunch of money. You know, more churches should actually be doing this. And I like the way that you describe how you guys did the school.
Yes.
You said it was aim.
Oh, yeah. Ready, fire, aim. We didn't overthink, didn't have that, you know, a whole longitudinal plan. We knew. We cannot, actually, it was the end, the summer was ending, and I said, we're going to send these children again to schools where the teachers won't even send their own children to the very school they're teaching at. We're sending them to schools where they can't come out reading. They're learning all kind of doctrines. The most racist thing they were learning was evolution. I mean, they're learning that we evolved from monkeys, and that was used to justify racism, colonialism, and everything else. And so within 2 weeks, I got up to preach and I said, we can't send these children back. We just cannot, because they're decimating our generations. And we literally opened the school in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's still functioning, and our children are doing well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So coffee. Some schools have different standards, unfortunately, for black children and for white children. How have you witnessed this, and how does this policy impact children of color?
I had a meeting with our superintendent because I was upset about something, and we were talking in the meeting, and then all of a sudden she says, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, should we have different standards of behavior for black kids and white kids? Because black families are all, ooh, and white families are all proper. And I said, so she wanted to have different standards of behavior in the school for black kids and white kids, like we're monkeys, like we can't behave like white people can. So that was an example. And I told her that in society, to job or not be arrested, there's a standard that we all have to live up to, and that it's not fair to hold our kids to a lesser standard, and frankly racist. Another example was in my son's math class last year. This teacher who was Indian was upset that she couldn't assign homework to the kids in calculus because the school told her that the black kids don't do homework. So they couldn't give homework to anybody. And it was kind of hard for my son just to do the homework just for no credit, like he was saying how hard it was for him to be motivated, but that was the reason for it. And so we have to, in order to have respect for ourselves and others, meet the same standards as anybody else, as everybody else in society. And we have to just do the hard work to get us up to speed instead of trying to have a quick fix of lowering standards. And we as people of color need to not say that everything, like that video we just watched, everything good in life, like being on time, doing homework, being successful, making money, being educated, speaking proper English is white. We are so harsh to each other. If we do well in school, we say, you're not black, your black card is taken away. And so we are our worst enemies, and we need to quit doing that.
Yeah. Would you talk just a little bit about standards on medical exam, bar exam, how those were lowered?
Yes, so the standards, they've now changed the bar exam in most states. The bar exam is being changed. I am a lawyer. The bar exam is being changed. And literally, they will say this because people of color aren't passing the bar exam. So they're lowering the standards for us. And I think that it's incredibly racist. We can do it. Because of affirmative action, when I went to law school, I wasn't sure if I made it there because of the color of my skin or because I was qualified. And, it's kind of like a psychosis. You wonder if you belong to be there. So I took 2 bar exams just to prove to myself and the world that I could do this. Why would somebody pay $500 an hour for my time if they thought that I got to law school because of the color of my skin? So I think it's incredibly racist, and I think it's terrible. And instead of these quick fixes of trying to lower standards, we need to teach our kids. We were born and created equal, and we need to teach our kids and do the hard work so that we can pass the test like everybody else.
Yeah, great. Mr. Qualls, lightning round?
Yeah, let's stay on this topic of education. And I want to expand on this DEI thing. When you say that they lowered it and it's racist, you got to remember, there are a lot of people saying they're doing it on our behalf. I tell people all the time, this whole DEI issue, it's not a civil rights 2.0 issue. It is a Trojan horse for a Marxist socialist agenda. They're using black people to trumpet in their agenda. You know what? People were passing the bar exam and passing medical boards in the 1800s in the black community. We have a family problem. We have an academic cultural problem that we got to fix it with our families. We don't have a standards problem. We want to keep those standards high. In fact, some of our surveys, the vast majority of black Americans nationally do not want to lower standards in order for more black people to pass them. That is a political, social agenda, and they're using our people to drive an agenda at our own expense. So let's stick on this. So Kevin, if you would, share a little bit about your experiences as it relates to education, the downward spiral, and what impact that's having on our children, and how do you think our ancestors feel about that today?
Yeah. So I'll use my personal experience of how I grew up. So I grew up in the inner city, and I did well in school. I had a mom who was very active and made sure that I excelled and didn't come up. She knew I could live up to what I was capable of doing. I was in the inner city. For high school, though, I got bussed out somewhere else. And what I realized was that where I came from, it wasn't that it was a bad school. It was just that we couldn't move as fast, right? And so those people who were struggling in that school wasn't because the school itself necessarily was bad. It was because, well, we talked about the home environment, right? And so once we realized that these kids can excel, once we realize that the expectations is what we need to have on them, that is what then leads them to reach those levels that we have set for them. But as we lower those expectations, we're sending the wrong message to them that they can't succeed because of systemic racism or whatever the reason may be, we're sending the wrong message instead of sending the message that they can achieve.
Great. So, Dr. Wallace, I'll point to you in the back. You're from Chicago. You've been involved in this type of advocacy in the right direction, especially from a biblical standpoint. What are your thoughts on this issue of education, and how the decline over the last few decades? What direction we need to go? What is that solution?
Well, we need to stop talking about allowing for the bigotry of low expectations. It's bigotry. It's racism to say that we can't live up to the standards. I mean, we were living up to the standards. I think Thomas Sowell talks about Dunbar High School.
Yes.
How the teachers there that black kids were doing just as well and sometimes better than white kids, right? And so we need to go back to that and stop acting as though we're not able to. So the success sequence, I don't know you're familiar with that, is finish high school, get a job, get married, then have children, and you're less likely to fall into poverty. And we need to do something about our education because our kids are falling. This is the last thing I want to say. I know it's supposed to be a lightning round. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is becoming a thunderstorm round. Yes.
So my thing is that bothers me so much as I look at kids in Chicago, and I think, and I forget what the actual numbers are, but it's like 13% can't read at level. They can't do math at particular level, and we're destroying these kids because we're failing them in school. Some of them are dropping out and getting involved in gang. And they're getting shot up in Chicago, as we know. And if they're not dropping out of school and shooting each other, they're listening to these teachers tell them that they could be a boy in a girl's body or a girl in a boy's body, so we're mutilating them. And then there's the third one, which I forget, but we're losing a generation of kids because they're all dying or being mutilated. They'll never have children.
Right.
They'll never have children because they're either dead or they've been emasculated because somebody told them a lie. And we're failing our kids.
Well, to that point, this is one of the reasons we want to have this panel discussion and highlight this. The vast majority of black Americans believe that children should grow up in a two-parent family, that they want and they want school choice. None of our legacy civil rights organizations support any of those two things. Not one. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people trying to push school choice in their communities, and they're getting no help whatsoever for what those organizations are supposed to be helping the black community. It's a political agenda, and it's deliberate, keeping a whole culture down to generational poverty to drive political agenda and their objectives. And then we're calling it out. This is not where we want to go, and we're inviting people to join our organization to help and highlight some of these pastors to actually help lead the culture back to its roots. This is not going to happen politically. It's got to happen at the grassroots level, and it has to have a Christian biblical point. And then we actually highlighted these pastors that are here. Terrell, Pastor Munger is in Memphis. I'm going to go back to you if you would. We're highlighting pastors that are biblically centered, traditional Christian faith. We're not looking for any Al Sharpton wannabes. These people have led our culture away, and unfortunately, we got a lot of pastors that are in that community. They're dancing with the Democrats with one foot, and they got the other foot in the pulpit. And I say Democrats, I'm politicians, doesn't matter what party, but we need people to have both feet in the pulpit and have it biblically centered, focused on restoring families. So, Pastor Munger, tell us about your March on Marriage that you had. And again, it's a little bit off of education, but everything cascades from that.
Yeah, all of it. We believe that healthy family is the fix because the health of the family determines how you see the world. And like you said, with so many people not even seeing marriage as an option, we did the March on Marriage the same way you honor the basketball players and the football players. Let's start honoring some of these present fathers, some of these healthy marriages, and not everybody saying it's a struggle. And so we had about 136 couples last year marching with us. This year we have 269 couples marching with us just to put love on display. Me and my wife phrase is, let's normalize being in love again. So that's the purpose of what we're doing the March on Marriage, to build the health of the family because that builds the health of the community.
Great, great. Again, if you're just joining us, we are commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Moynihan report. Basically, what that report highlighted back 60 years ago, that there's a national call of action. 24% of children were born outside the bonds of marriage. Today is nearly 80% of kids outside of marriage. What's tragic about this is that if we were a gray wolf or a black bear, we would be put on the endangered species list. There would be galas and there would be initiatives. There would be bumper stickers, Save the Black Family, right next to Free Tibet. But for political reasons, they've allowed a whole culture, millions of collateral damage of communities, not just in the black community, just the overflow of negative impact of crime and everything else in other communities. And they did it for political reasons, and they're still doing it today. And we're playing a flag in the ground. It stops now. We need to turn the culture around. Again, this has got to be a grassroots movement. And that brings me to the issue of crime. This last segment we're going to hit. Again, because of the breakdown of the family, what Patrick Moynihan and his report highlighted was we're going to see an increase of crime because these kids don't have a father in the home. Now, what you're looking at this graph is an FBI violent crime statistics. They rate this every year. Again, this is violent crime, not shoplifting or anything else. They've been tracking this for decades, ever since J. Edgar Hoover was in the FBI. And you can see that there was a peak in the 1990s. Well, there's a direct correlation from the time that the welfare program started in the 60s to where we are in this point in the 90s, at the peak of this. What happened is that this was the highest percentage of time that in America that had fatherless boys growing up. As they reached the teenage years and early 20s, when you don't have a father in the home, all the statistics show this. We have 50 years of data, more propensity for higher violent crime. And when that happened in the 1990s, the entire country is going like, we need to do something. Our city's overrun. Crack cocaine was big at the time. And so at the time, President Clinton was in the White House, and they signed and passed the crime bill. And this $1 billion crime bill allowed for communities to hire 100,000 police officers. And those police officers were deployed nationally in different cities. They had the budget to recruit them locally. And this is something I want to correct as well, because our police officers have been made scapegoats for what's been happening in our communities, the policing in our communities. The crime came first. The cops came second. This is what we see in a lot of our communities around the country is a culture, or literally a culture out of control. I mean, it has gotten even worse than what we see here in the 1990s. And so with that said, I want to go back to the panel and talk about this, but just a minute, I could just share with you, here in Minneapolis, we've had, in the most recent time, we had a 10-year-old steal a car, take that car and drive it around in the daytime in a park, in a community park with other kids. He's 10. He had a rap sheet. And we just had 4 teenage kids. I mean, they ranged from 11 to 14, just accost a senior citizen. This woman was in her 60s, drag her down and beat her. And there's been no outrage, no sense of accountability in the black community when we see this crisis. So I want to go to the panel. We're going to talk about this because at the end of the day, there needs to be some accountability, ownership. Again, all of this is a byproduct of families being destroyed. Terrell, you're in Memphis. You know, it has a pretty high crime rate. You know, we talked about a recent police shooting there. Please talk about that. And what are some solutions again that you believe that needs to happen?
Yeah, one of the things you already said was the standards have been lowered so much. And when you see the adults just blatantly disrespecting authority, they're teaching the kids to disrespect the teachers, to disrespect the principals, to even disrespect the parents. And it's been normalized so much. It's in our music, it's in our TV shows, it's in our conversations. So when you try to introduce a standard, instead of feeling like you're bringing them up, they feel like you're judging them and putting them down. So we have to have a totally different turnaround on how we even view what authority is and the purpose of it. That submission is for your protection. It's not for you to make you feel less than. It's to help you be the most that you can be. And so that's what we're trying to do in Memphis, to kind of reverse that understanding of authority, to see it is to help you become and not to keep you from being.
Lawrence, if you would, this idea of respect, the idea that, especially, you don't necessarily need a title. If you're an elder, forget that you're a teacher or a police. This idea that you owe these people respect because you're still learning, you're still a minor, those type of things, and we can see that kind of chaos in our communities. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Kendall, in responding to what you were talking about, the incident where you had the 11 and 15-year-olds accost a 60-year-old woman, and there was no outrage. I actually was terribly outraged and spoke to a lot of people about that. Now, the kids were, if you know anything about Minneapolis, they were in North Minneapolis. And if you know anything about North Minneapolis, sadly, that respect thing comes into play because there are people who are held hostage by the violence in Minneapolis. I've done a lot of work over the years in North Minneapolis on my own dime. I'm from Detroit. I'm not afraid to walk around North Minneapolis, but I literally cringe and cry when I walk through them today because the deterioration, which was obvious decades ago, is only getting worse. The people are not respected, and to be political, the city council and the mayor only go into those neighborhoods when it's election time. They don't solve the problem.
No, in fact, I think some of their policies are making it worse. This idea that they can't help themselves and we need lenient policy, it's making the communities more violent, and it's spreading out even beyond their own communities. So it's tragic. So Chris, you're one of our youngest ones here. What are your thoughts when you see this happening within the young community? What are your thoughts? As you hear some of the things, you see the data. What are your thoughts on solutions moving forward?
Yeah, certainly from my perspective, I'm concerned because I got a feel for my dad's generation and the state of the family when he grew up, and I can see that fraying as we progress here. So I really think the answer is having more concern for the truth. A lot of this deleterious thought is marrying a truth to a lie. And the truth is there are things for which we are not to blame. That's the truth. But the lie is that we're no longer responsible. So I think if we had a better understanding of that, then we could have people understand you are not to blame for this, but you are responsible.
So expand on that. Well, you're not to blame for it. And I believe what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not to blame for the situation you're born into.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, go a little quick sermon. It applies to sin as well. Some of our sins we inherit. Some of my sins I've inherited. That's natural for all of us, but I'm responsible for all of them. And I think that's a place we can grow to where there's great caution, especially among white people, to be careful of victim blaming. And it's understandable where that comes from, but when the response is that we're going to lower the bar, well, that compounds the issue.
Right. So to give the audience an idea of this background, I speak on this because of how I grew up in a broken family, but those of you're successful, you made it out. How many of you have grown up in a broken family, very difficult circumstances, poverty, public assistance, the whole thing? So nearly half the group. So not a lot of privilege in this panel. Okay, the key is there a pathway out? And I think what we need to convey is that this idea that the promise of America is available to everyone, it is. Now, it may be harder for some than others, but there's a pathway. And we want to, and what we believe is that our churches, our school systems, public policy should be pointing the way for people to have that pathway out. And that's really what we want to accomplish.
We're offering a pathway out with Washington Academy. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, you're right. We're offering that. This is something that we started this last year. We believe that pathway out is an education. Many of us, even though we grew up in very difficult circumstances, our public school systems were good enough to help us be competitive in the marketplace, right? And so we started Washington Academy because today's school systems are not. It's the private schools, and we're partnering with churches to use their facilities Monday through Friday. And we have the curriculum. We're hiring teachers. Sheila is leading that charge with us with Washington Academy. Do you want to expand on that a bit?
Well, yeah, you know, the data shows that children from underprivileged families who actually go to private school or private Christian school, the lot of the whole family improves. There's less divorce among the parents. There's less teen pregnancy with the kids. The kids score higher on standardized testing. So it's not like with Washington Academy, we're just trying to help the children. We're helping the children, but as a result, that's going to help the entire family. So that's what's really incredible. And we're going to be 90% donor funded, which means tuition will be very, very low for families because we don't want any child to not be able to attend our school because of money.
Yeah, and the other part of that is about standards. So we're going to hold high standards of academic excellence, but also they're going to get a moral education, moral standards, and also we're going to teach them true American history. Yes, we have sins of the past, but I tell people all the time, I share this, I got this from Vody Bachman. He says there are black people all over the world that wish they were American citizens, except native-born black Americans. They've been taught they hate their country, and that's the most craziest thing in the world. Our ancestors right now are rolling in their graves of what's happening in the culture, and we today, we owe them better. And we need to embrace our citizenship, if we can, with full gusto as first-class American citizens and not buy into this lie and despise our country, sit down for, the Pledge of Allegiance or disrespect the flag, all those things. That's a socialist agenda, and this Marxist DEI, these Marxist programs are been used to do that. So I'm going to go back to the audience as we get pretty close to wrapping up. I want to go to people that have limited time to speak. Hillary, what are some of your final thoughts before we close out?
I think there's something to be said about individuality. So our Constitution says that we hold these truths to be evident, that all men are created equal and have been endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That came from Genesis 1:27, where God said that let us make man in our own image. So that means that we are equal. People want to equate equality with equality in outcome, but that's not true. Equality means that we're saying that the opportunity is there, but it's the doer that creates the difference in what happens in the income in the outset. So the word says that it's the hand of the diligent that makes rich. So that opportunity is there for everyone, but what you do with it is up to you.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Hillary. Dr. Wallace? Final comments?
Yeah, there's so my wife and I have a ministry as well, Freedom's Journal Institute, and we have a initiative called Black Families Matter. And we talk about how the church is not leading the way. The one good thing about the church is that we're in the way of socialism, right? But the bad thing is there's a lot of churches that have incorporated socialism. And if you just think about the Black Church PAC that was out not too long ago, the three things that they emphasized was mass incarceration, gun violence, and voter suppression. And the family was nowhere to be found. Education was nowhere to be found. And actually, mass incarceration is a byproduct of the family actually falling apart. And so it's time for the church to stand up when we're trying to get the church folks to actually realize that voting for people who don't share your values is not a good thing in our communities, and it's what's making our communities actually fall apart.
Pastor Matthews.
Yeah, and I just want to continue with that, because our inherent challenge is to raise up the next generation properly. This is what God has given us. Psalms 127 said, children are like arrows in the hand of a man being shot into the world. True spiritual warfare is being able to disciple, raise up the next generation, pour into that generation. That's what parenting is. We reflect and represent the values not only of God, but of our community. And when the church, and I don't think I should say the church. When organizations that call themselves churches that are not really the church, they're not the ecclesia, stray from that and go strictly to an agenda that has been set for them, then they've strayed from really the imago Dei that God had for us, that we really must recognize we're set in the image of God. And Black, white, Latino, Asian, First Nation, no matter where you are from, we're set in the image of God. And that concept of personhood, and I think that's what you were talking about, that concept of personhood has been undermined, and we've been following racist ideology, doctrines of demons, and unwittingly thinking that that's keeping it real.
Yeah, good. Yeah. All right, Alfreda. And then Kevin, we'll go to you next, and then come down.
Well, I'm one of those fortunate souls that was born into a two-parent household, into a community where there were fathers everywhere. So I can tell you what a different life that is. And it is infuriating to me that we allowed an immoral welfare policy to be put in place that fed and nurtured a baby mama, baby daddy culture that is an affront to God and insulting to our ancestors. And the only way back, I think, is to support churches that have biblical values, get our education straight, and adopt some of the things that Moynihan suggested around uplifting black men.
Yeah.
That's why black men voted for Trump, I think. They're tired of being treated like garbage. Yeah. And I am personally insulted for the men in my family that I love.
Pastor, quick.
Yes, very inspiring, and I agree with everything that's been said. I personally believe that it's important for us to actually get involved at the level of the family. I believe that getting people, first of all, to embrace covenant relationship, I mean, that keeps a man and a woman together. I believe that having a generational view, looking past my own success or my own enjoyment, my own pleasure, my own self-fulfillment, and realize that I am a link in a chain of generations and I've got to pass something forward, and getting them to embrace a generational view, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not just Abraham alone. And I think the personhood is very important. We talk about the fact of actually having, and personhood to me means embracing who I am and the role that God has naturally called me to. And I find that to be most fulfilling, because the first place in Scripture that we hear honor is talking about parents. Honor your mother and your father. And so I think that getting people to embrace those two roles as most impactful thing that they can do in life, and that is provide covering for a child, produce a God seed that's going to be moral, that's going to be just, going to be fair, and going to pass it on to the next generation, is the greatest investment of our time as individuals. And so that, along with that, of course, it takes education. And it also takes us fighting against a culture that fights against our ability to do just that. Mm-hmm. And that's why we take charge, and what we do is so important. One thing that we've done, we have got a group called 199 Men. Don't know why God called it that. But the Lord told me to have a different type of conversation with men of color. He said, start with the culture and bridge it to the Bible. So we talked about social issues. We talked about racial issues. We talked about society issues that they have to deal with. But the most important ones were the ones that they could influence. They could influence a lot of the culture issues. They could pull the pants up. They could change their attitude toward women. They could change their attitude toward work. They could change their attitude toward their children. And those things made a tremendous difference in the men that we ministered to, even though they weren't very successful at changing how the community operated, but they changed the way they operated, and their children became beneficiaries of that. So I think that part of what we must do is, I think there's an area attack and there's a ground attack. And the area attack is important because it lets us know where the enemy is, and it educates us to know how to deal with them on the ground. But we've got to get down with those men who never knew their father, but they have that innate ability to make a child. And we can't leave them alone because they're going to perpetuate the situation that we're trying to bring an end to.
Yeah.
We got to deal with those men.
Right. Well, you know, as we talked about all night, that this issue is not going to be solved, politically. Now, some of the policies can change politically, but we need a grassroots movement focused on this, and this is why we drafted this document. This is a declaration of redemption and revival, or actually it's called revival and redemption. We drafted this. You can find this at takechargeus.com. You can look on the link there. You can take a look at that. If you agree with it, you can actually electronically sign up for it. And basically what this says is, first, we the people. And if you see what it looks like and how it's replicated just like the Declaration of Independence. It is like we need to take charge of our own culture, our own life, not to wait for politicians. They screwed it up enough. This is really about getting our own act together and being responsible. And how we do that? We do that by rededicating ourselves to our Christian heritage, our Christian faith, and acknowledging the people that actually led us astray. We have a lot of these organizations that not only have they led us astray, even still to this very day, they're doing so at our expense to drive their own political agenda, their own wealth and greed. And what makes it so, for me, they're using our disparities to divide, to put forth division in our country, to foment hatred, resentment, jealousy, all these different things for a political agenda at our expense. They're willing to do that to weaken our country. I just find that abhorrent. Again, our national survey that we conducted, when we surveyed Black Americans, what are the major institutions that influence your personal decisions? I mean, sad part about this is good news and bad news. The bad news about this, we've lost it. The church used to be predominantly 50% or more. Today, it's gone down. However, when it comes to these institutions, the first one is none, actually, nearly half. None of these organizations influence my personal decisions. But the number one institution that does is still the church. There is still hope. And in that hope, it's got to be biblical truth-minded. Okay, again, not these political organizations that call themselves a church. It's got to be from a biblically centered organization. Now, as our organization at Take Charge, we're going across the country. We're identifying pastors like these men here in the audience that we can partner with so we can help elevate their voice, elevate their presence, because we are constantly censored. You'll never see a program like this in legacy media. Rarely do you ever see someone. If you do see someone, they're an anomaly. They don't represent the majority of Black Americans. Ironically, we do. Regardless of their political affiliation, our voices represent where the vast majority of Black Americans are, and that we do believe in this promise of America is available to everyone, regardless of social station, and we're going to be the spark that starts this movement across the nation. We thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us. I also want to mention that our partners that are here with us, I want to thank them as well, from Alpha News, who partners with us on the live stream, as well as many of these folks, or several of these folks here, including myself, are part of the Project 21 network with the National Center for Public Policy. We have volunteers in our organization, nearly 100, and on our multimedia library, on our website, we have over 60 videos of people having their personal testimonies of basically denouncing critical race theory, denouncing DEI, if you can believe it, denouncing Black Lives Matter. We have one of the founders of Black Lives Matter here from St. Paul on our video stream here. After a year and a half in it, he learned these guys don't care about Black lives. It's a farce. So you'll see all of that at our video library there. take a look at that. These are short little segments. If you're interested in volunteering, you can contact us as well. This is going to be a grassroots movement that's going to take hold. So we thank you for joining us. Before we end, I'm going to ask our friend here, Chris Taylor, to close this out in prayer, and we ask that you join us. Again, why are we doing this? Why are we so heavily rooted in Scripture, Bible, and faith? That's what the culture was before we had help from the government. The culture was identified as really focused on faith, family, and education. So it is really a sense about getting back to our roots, and endangered species will be getting it back to a level of healthiness. And so we're going to ask us to close this program in prayer.
Thank you. Lord Jesus Christ, I thank you for the opportunity to grow closer to you together, for those in this room, for those watching, for the whole country. I pray we would grow in concern for what is true and what is right, and worry less about what's expedient or comfortable. I pray your Spirit would work through us, and that first we would help children grow up healthy and according to your design, and take the responsibility meant for us, and that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lord Jesus Christ, in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well,
if you want to find out more about us, you can go to takechargeus.com. That's takechargeus.com. If you want to find out more about Washington Academy, you can go to mywashingtonacademy.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.